Hey folks, I wanted to talk to you all a bit more about the details of Assignment 2, and along the way, by way of explanation, and also to give us some more context for the kinds of things we're going to be doing, I actually want to talk a little bit about Assignment 1. If you haven't seen, the marks for Assignment 1 are out now, and I think everybody did a really good job. It's great to see the amount of effort and attention that you're putting into getting good at this subject. I just wanted to talk through about a couple of things that I think as a class people could be stronger at, and that knowing that, I think you'll be able to do a better job of tackling Assignment 2. So the first thing that I noticed as something that I think was a weakness of the whole class was that we said to tell a story, not to tell the story of the data. And what we mean by that is you shouldn't be trying to tell the story of the whole thing. There was an obvious story in that COVID data. Cases went up, mobility went down. That's not actually very interesting. It's very obvious. And yet that was kind of the story that a lot of people built. We were hoping that at least for those who were interested in getting a good mark, that doesn't have to be everybody, but at least for those who wanted to, we were hoping that you would find something a little deeper. Let me give you an example. This is what Rachel, one of your tutors, came up with. I believe she showed this in her class, but for those who aren't in her class, I wanted to show it here as well. This is an example that has a specific story that is communicated right up front. Let's have a look at that title. Amid inaction and confusing messages from the Australian government, the Australian people took charge. Righto, you got your story right up front. And if you look at that chart on the right, it's clear that the mobility of Australians went down before restrictions were introduced. That's the story. That's an interesting thing to say. And to do it, Rachel has used just the 3 weeks before the lockdown, the 3 weeks before the first couple of cases and the 3 weeks after. Didn't need to use all of the data at all. That's the kind of thing that means that you have told a story. You have come up with your unique story of this data. Excuse me, I'm drinking a cup of tea. I have a bit of a sore throat. Children are germ factories and daycare is a plague pit. And YouTube is hard on the throat. So beyond telling a specific story, the second thing that I wanted to talk about was what does it mean to justify your design? What does it mean to say that your design is a good design? And to answer that, I think it's easy to confuse this, and I think a number of people did in this class. They confused motivating their design with justifying their design or with evaluating their design. Let's work through what those three things are. When you motivate your design, you're telling someone that this thing will have value, that this is a good thing to make because when we make it, it will help solve a problem. It'll help solve a societal problem. It'll help solve a corporate problem. It'll help your client. Your stakeholders will benefit from this thing because it's going to save lives, or it's going to save money, or some combination of the two. That motivates your design. That is about saying, this is how to make the right thing. Justifying your design is different. When you justify your design, you say, we have made the thing right. We are arguing that this thing will actually do what it says on the tin. And there's kind of two ways to justify a design, and I think you're all thinking about one of them. You can justify a design through hypotheses, through argument, by saying, we believe this idea is a good idea. And I think informally you all do that when you come up with concepts, when you come up with designs. You come up with ones that you think are going to be good. That doesn't necessarily mean that you tell me about why they're going to be good, though, because it gets a little confused with the second kind. The second kind of justification is justification through users. And I know your lecturers have been saying for years now, you have to test, you have to use real users, you have to take real people's experiences of using your prototype. This is, after all, user-centered, human-centered design. But that doesn't mean you don't have ideas about why something is a good idea. You know why you chose that natural color palette, why you chose those muted earthy tones. Tell me. You know why you chose that layout for the visualization. You have some hypothesis about why it's good. Tell me. This is not art. We do not intuit from our inspirations, from our experiences, something that comes fully formed from within, we make decisions based on how best to address the desired value proposition of our designs. And if you want to go out into the real world and be a designer, then you are going to need to communicate why these things are a good idea. Why did you make that decision? You should always have an answer to that. Because you're going to get on the job, your creative director is going to pull you in and say, hey, how are you on those screens? Oh yeah, I've done this, this, and this. Wait, why? She'll say, why did you do that? And you better be able to say, actually, look, I picked the blue because I think it's going to fit with this emotion that we want people to have. I picked this because it's going to look absolutely cracking with the orange on their logo. It doesn't matter which of those answers it is. It matters that you have an answer that you believe in because you have thought about it. And because I think this is such a big part of the real design process, because you're not going to be designing by yourself and you're not going to have the luxury of doing testing it at every stage, you need to do this. And so I've put it in your assignments. So there are, I think, 3 different ways to do this. If this is feeling a little bit unusual for you, how do I justify it? How do I think about it? There's 3 different components to this. The first one of these kind of approaches is to say, does my idea address the value prop? What is your hypothesis about how doing this thing will actually solve the problem? You should be able to say, this design will be an effective design because I think it'll help more people sign up. I think this layout is an easier thing for people to understand. I think mapping the size to the y-axis is more natural for people because then big things are bigger. The second thing that you can ask yourself is to do a simple pro-con analysis. Which of my designs, and you should have multiple ideas, remember, you need to be critical about your own work. You need to come up with multiple ideas and then pick the good one. It will lead to better designs in the long run. Which of your ideas have more strengths and weaknesses? Just list them out, write some lists, pick a good one. It's our way of making a decision, and it's a way of having reasons behind that decision, and that's hugely important. And the third thing you can consider is which one of these ideas actually showcase the information that your client is interested in. When you go out into the world, that might be your boss, that might be your actual client, but here in your university degree, your client's me. But to go deeper on what your client actually wants, let's have a think about how to get good marks for an assignment. You can do the thing that's what you think you're supposed to do, but you got to learn to play the game a little bit. A lot of folks in the first assignment just didn't read the requirements and how you were going to be marked in all that much detail. Honestly, it's the easiest way to get marks without having to do all that much stuff. Read the rubric for how you're going to be marked. Don't just read the assessment description on Canvas. So let's go through and have a look at what does Canvas and the rubric say for assignment 2, because I think this is going to help answer some of your questions. There's an introductory paragraph in there that talks about how you're going to be doing predictive visualization. Then it gives you the data set, and it says down the bottom, your task is to select a subset of countries or regions. Use what you learn about regression in the tutorials to make a prediction for the future of child mortality in those countries, and then use them to tell a story. So you're going to have to pick a couple of countries that let you tell an interesting story, and you're probably going to have to support that data with stuff from other sources. And in this case, unlike in assignment 1, it is perfectly reasonable for you to use other data sets and other data from anywhere that you can find it, so long as it supports your story about child mortality or something related to child mortality. See, as the assignment description goes on, it says we're going to be making a piece of data journalism, so we're going to be writing an article. It's going to be 750-ish words, so that's what, a page and a half, 2 pages of text. That is not a lot for an article. We are expecting quality over quantity. I think I literally say that. Yeah, focus on quality over quantity. It's not about telling me everything about this story. It's about making it as punchy as possible. And if you believe that you can go out into the world as a designer and not have to write clear, concise, compelling text, you're wrong. Sorry, you're just wrong. It is so helpful to be able to produce good copy, to be able to understand who is going to read something and then make some words that are compelling for that person. it is one of the most useful skill sets for you to have in your back pocket. So you're going to need to make this as a website, as a self-contained zip. Read the specific instructions like that, make it a zip, make a comment explaining your justification. If you don't do that stuff, you're just giving up free marks. Remember to comment your code. You incorporate elements you find elsewhere. Stealing is good, but you must acknowledge, etc., etc., etc. Demonstrate your skill through adapting and integrating code, adding its technological distinctiveness to your own. So we're not looking for you to build this stuff from scratch if you're particularly worried about the coding component, but we're looking for you to have enough technical savvy to go and slap stuff together that you found on Stack Overflow and make it your own. And of course, tell me how it works. So then we get on to the 3 rubrics that are going to be used for this assignment: storytelling, design quality, and data science. And the difference between this assignment as opposed to the previous one is that it has that data science component at the end where you are expected to do some code. So storytelling is clearly and concisely explain the choices that you've made. So that's that justify thing that I just talked about. Make sure you justify, not just motivate your work. And make sure the narrative that you're communicating, the story in your article, is, and here's a list of things you can check: compelling, in that it motivates people to believe, understand, or empathize with your point; clear, in that it is simple and simply stated; and interesting, in that it would be novel, surprising, or original in some matter to your intended audience. That is a specific checklist of stuff that the markers will be using to see if you've done a good job. So you should use them to see if you're finished. Design quality. Similar checklist here. Design a clear, clean, and communicative set of charts focusing on the predictions that your model makes and how that tells your story. So some part of your story should be that predictive component, because we're learning how to visualize predicted data and clearly demarcate that past data from the predicted data. So obviously your visual treatment, your mapping, or your styling should in some way indicate this is observed data from the past and this is predicted data from the future. Give your chart an appropriate aesthetic in such a way that doesn't get in the way of your story, but in fact helps you tell it. These are the things that you will be marked on, and so therefore these are the things that you should put your time into. And in the data science, you make your predictions not rubbish, obviously, document your process, and clearly comment your code as well as acknowledge your sources. But that's not it. There's one more thing that you need to have a look at before you can be convinced that you're going to do a good assignment. And that's the rubric. These rubrics are visible on Canvas. This is how we actually give you marks. This is how you get points. And no, I don't know why there's an extra no marks category in that first row. I'm just bad at computers, or I'm certainly bad at Canvas. This breaks down what you need to do to get a high distinction in each of those 3 categories that we talked about. High distinction for data storytelling means highly effective visual storytelling with data that is clear, compelling, and original, and that your justification clearly explains how the data mapping supports the narrative. So in other words, how your decisions of how you visualize that data tie into that narrative. You have to not just explain what the narrative is, but how your decisions have supported it. Design quality. Well, you need a highly effective integration of aesthetic and/or human-centered qualities into your design with a justification that is not only compelling, but coherent and interesting. See again how important the justification is there. You don't just have to have made a beautiful thing and an effective thing, but you have to have told us why your decisions led to it being beautiful and effective. And for data science, you need to have effectively integrated, adapted, and synthesized your data as needed for the visualization. Your processes and your code need to be original, elegant, and show a deep grasp of the underlying data science concepts. So if you've done that, if you actually feel you've done that, then you're going to get an HD. We forget sometimes that university is not the real world. It is a game. You win at the game by understanding the rules of the game. You win at anything, in the real world or no, that's a fake separation. You win at anything by understanding the incentive structures, the evaluation structures, and the reward structures of the system in which you find yourself and playing them to your advantage. I recommend you do that here. I've laid all of the rules out plain as day. Make sure you don't give up any free marks. But I also wanted to answer a couple of specific questions about the assignment that I've seen people ask. What even are these child mortality numbers? They're deaths per 1,000 live births. So miscarriages don't count, but anywhere where there was a live birth recorded, but then that child unfortunately later died, they become one of these statistics. I don't know why it's reported per 1,000. That's just a thing that people do in the world public health field. It's a standard. All standards are arbitrary. Do we need to include Australia? No, you totally don't. Tell me a story about anything. I've had people contact me about specific countries or specific regions that they want to talk about for specific reasons, how they're going to relate them to ongoing or historical events within those regions. Think broad. Pick something you're interested in. Pick something that you have knowledge of. Pick something that you want other people to have knowledge of. Pick something that you want to educate. If you can be intrinsically motivated to do something, it'll always help you. The data comes with a bunch of country groupings, like it groups high-income countries and stuff like that. Can you use them? Yeah, totally. Can you make your own groupings, arbitrary or otherwise? Yeah, totally. Just go into Excel and add together a bunch of rows. It should be easy. How do we do the prediction bit? Well, that one's on me. This tutorial should clearly have been earlier in the subject. This is the first time I've run this one. I didn't clock that as I was putting these tutorials together. The prediction tutorial should have been back before the JavaScript tutorials, right after the Excel one, because we're going to be doing the prediction in Excel. That stuff is coming up in next week's class, and it is effectively just a way to take a sequence of numbers and use a model to come up with the next couple of numbers to come along. It's the most basic kind of, it's not even really technically machine learning, it's just predictive statistics, but the line between those two things is fairly arbitrary, so really it comes down to using data to predict the future. It's not that complicated. We're going to teach you how to do it in the tutorial, and if you want to work on your assignment before then just come up with some best guess predictions and make sure you record them in as best guess prediction using the model of me and my Mark 1 human eyeball, then replace them with the real ones when you get that data after having done the tutorial. So that's all from me for today. I hope that gives you the information that you need to be confident that you're going to kick ass at this second assignment. Thank you again for all of the hard work you put into the first ones, and I'll see you in class.